Thank you for being here. I am warmly welcoming you all. It almost makes me cry how many people are here and how wonderful it is to have you all so invested in our wonderful congregation. And I know it had nothing to do with the sweet rolls. So we are, and please help yourself to the sweet rolls and the fruit that we have there. There's coffee and tea over here. As you wish during the morning, we will have a break mid-morning. We again want to thank Sandra for being here to help us today as we begin to drill down into some of our goals and ideals, the things that we want to work at as a congregation. But before we start, I would like to open in prayer. This is a prayer that we have been using on the Strategic Task Force, and I would like to start with that again this morning, please. Gracious God, we thank you for our congregation, for our Anabaptist Christian faith, for our ministry together. Bless our commitment to follow Jesus, to be faithful in our time, to be diligent in our work. We seek your presence that we may love each other well, that we may love our congregation well, that we will love well those whom we are called to serve. We seek your Spirit to enlighten our minds, to purify our hearts, to strengthen our wills. We seek your direction to know which way to choose and which ways to refuse, which action to claim and which to reject, which path to take and which to avoid, so that we may faithfully serve in our congregation, in our community, and in our world. In the name of Jesus we pray, amen. And welcome, Sandra.
Okay, good morning. I almost started crying when Sue said she almost started crying. I'm really incredibly touched by your commitment to this process. Is this on? Is this on? Yep. Thanks. So thank you for being here, and especially on a Saturday and on a beautiful Saturday. We were saying, well, we're glad we didn't have a snowstorm, but we're not so sure we would have asked for beautiful spring-like weather. That could be a little discouraging too. So thanks for being here. Let me just remind you who the facilitation team members are. Raise your hand if you're here, facilitation team members. Great, thank you again. And again, my name's Sandra Herron. I think I've met most of you before, and as we've been moving through this process. Our agenda today is to, it's basically a rhythm of 3 exercises. We're going to talk through some strategic planning nomenclature just to remind ourselves where we are in this process. And then we're going to do a series of 3 table exercises for each of the 3 strategic priorities and try to begin to set some goals for each of those strategic priorities. What we'll do is we'll do table exercise, report out, table exercise, report out, table exercise, report out 3 times. And then at the end, you're going to get stickers and you're going to get to vote on your favorite, what you think should be the top goals. And we'll use that as sort of a prioritization exercise at the end, sort of like for those who were here last time, the coins in the bucket. So it's your chance to weigh in at the end on your individual thoughts about priorities. So just as a reminder where we are, we're moving through the process. In January 24th, we determined strategic priorities. And so today we'll be identifying goals for each priority. It looks like the next step is celebrate, but identifying and prioritizing these goals and putting some tactics behind it will take us a little bit of time in March. But we are almost to the celebrate the strategic plan phase. Just as a reminder, the strategic priorities that we identified 7 in January, but we ranked them. There was sort of a natural break between the top 3 and the bottom 4. And so we're choosing 3 major areas of focus today, limited in number, broad in aim, to really guide the long-term direction. Does not mean that there won't be a series of activities and programs and new tactics related to some of the other priorities, but we're going to focus on 3 today. In terms of the goals, which is really what we're doing today, they come from those strategic priorities. And ideally, we're not going to ask you to kind of do these SMART goals today because they take some work. But we're going to ask you to kind of start that process, something pretty specific, pretty measurable, achievable, relevant, and time limited. And I'm going to give you an example in just a minute. And then once we have those goals, the commissions, the leadership teams, the staff, along with your input, will start to define some of these tactics, some of the how we'll achieve these strategic priorities and goals, and how we'll allocate resources, which may require some conversation about reducing some programs or exiting some ministries in order to free up resources for new things. So that's the conversation that will take place in March. But in terms of today, we're going to be looking at these top 3 strategic priorities. You have some documents at the scribe will be working from documents that have these on them at the tables. Hospitality and welcoming, we have reworded some of these since the January meeting, not to say that they won't still go through some refinement, but let me just read them to you. We will embrace diversity and improve our practices related to welcoming and actively including and inviting others into our physical space and spiritual community. So that's the first one we're going to work on today. Second, spiritual formation and discipleship. As CMCers of all ages seek to follow Jesus, we will deepen our faith, strengthen our theological understanding, especially of our own Anabaptist traditions, and grow through spiritual practices. And then finally, community and unity. We will grow in our practice of love, caring, and unity, respecting diversity within our congregation and our community. So those are the 3 we're going to be working on today. In terms of the goal-setting matrix, what we're going to do at our tables is we're going to, first of all, generate ideas. So you're going to kind of spend a little time sort of brainstorming. Hopefully you've had a chance to reflect on this in advance based on the handout in your mailboxes. And then we're going to ask you to seek group consensus on up to 3. If you only come up with 1 or 2, that's fine. But a table consensus around 1 or 2 goals for that strategic priority that you think are really critical, and begin to write goal statements. And then what we'll do is we'll actually have the tables report out the goal statements and post those around the room. And those are the things you'll have an opportunity to vote on. This is the goal setting matrix. Hopefully you all had a chance to look at this before today, and then there are copies at your table as well. And we're looking at thinking about sort of 4 ways of thinking about our programs and ministries. What is it that, and there's a list on your table of things that we're doing today. So the list on your table of programs and ministries that CMC has today. So we don't necessarily need to talk about those unless you do one of 3 things with them. One is you want to do more of it and better. So you're going to kind of do something that you're already doing, but it really needs to be ratcheted up a notch. So for example, we are welcoming guests today, but one of the common themes that's come out is we need to do a better job with our guest process and our guest experience. So it's something we're doing today for existing people, but we want to kind of move it up a notch. And so that's an example I'm going to give you of a goal statement so that you see how that plays out. Something that you're doing today, but you want to attract new people to it. So for instance, small group participation, one of the key themes in the survey was that we really want more people engaged in small groups. So it's an existing program, but you want to bring more people into the fold. Similarly, you may say we've got an existing group of people, but we want to develop some new program for them down in the lower left quadrant. An example of that might be we have members today, but we need to do a better job of identifying those who may kind of have one foot out the door and have some process for bringing them back in before the horse is out of the barn, as they say. So some sort of a retention risk process. Do we know how long it's been since someone's been here? Has someone made a call to invite them back? What does that process look like to just sort of keep our members close? And then finally, are there new things that we need to do for new audiences? So if we said, for example, college students, I'm not sure what exactly is going on today with college students, but let's say that we want a new program that specifically appeals to brand new Goshen College students every fall. Or new intergenerational programs, which might engage students with seniors in some way, sort of adopt a grandparent while you're at Goshen College. So that would be an example of something new that we do for a new audience. So we want you to brainstorm kind of those 4 quadrants and then pick 1, 2, up to 3, however many kind of goal statements you feel like you can do. We're going to have about 45 minutes per exercise. Is that right? Yep, 45. And I'll kind of come around and see if you need that much time. So, kind of keep me posted. If we don't need quite that much, we'll move forward and get you out mowing your grass earlier. 3 parts to the goal statement. What will we do? How will we do it? And why will we do it? In a brief sentence. But those are kind of the 3 things you want to be able to say. As an example, by September 1st, so now we're talking about time limited, we're being sort of specific here, we will design and implement a new Sunday morning guest experience process. That's the what will we do. Using clearly defined tools, guidelines, and language, giving you a little elevator speech, sound bites, welcome tool, guidelines for how to kind of spot a newcomer. That's the how. So every CMC member and attender can identify and enthusiastically welcome guests. That would be the why. So there's an example. So pretty brief statement, but it says, what will we do? How will we do it? Why will we do it? And some indication of by when. Some of these things you might sort of say, we'll do it in 2016, we'll do it in 2017. Think about kind of sequencing. Sometimes things will make sense in different order relative to others. So, any questions? You have a facilitator at your table who has been briefed on this process. You also have a copy of the Growth Task Force report and a list of things that were identified. If you remember way back to the congregational meeting where we talked about the survey results and we had tables identify one thing that we really want to address in strategic planning, I've put a copy of those 1 things on your table too in case you want to refer back to those. Yes? I don't think we want to worry about that today. There will be a point at which we do that. We will say, who's going to decide what the resources are? Is it going to be assigned to a commission or staff or whatever? If you want to throw that in there, that's fine, but that's not necessarily, we're kind of trying to get at the what today. And not even a lot of details around the how, but just sort of enough detail that we know kind of what you're talking about. Great question. Other questions? Gone through this pretty fast, but so I'm going to leave this up on the screen as you work around your tables. We didn't make a copy of this for everybody, but the scribe does have one. And so the scribe's role, table facilitator will kind of guide you through the process. Please assign a scribe, and then 4 pages should be turned in at the end of today. 1, the copy of this matrix filled out for each of the 3 strategic priorities we're talking about, and then the 4th is just a list of the table participants and any kind of additional notes that we want to record. So, and I'll be wandering around if you have questions, and you got 45 minutes. Good luck. Okay, we want to come back together now. We're ready to do the table reports. So share with us either your brief goal statement, or if it's not perfectly refined, give us enough of an idea so that we know what you're talking about, so if somebody wants to vote on it later, they can. So, Marty, you want to start at that table back there?
Well, this isn't necessarily brief, but we did our best. One thing we did not create a statement about, but had significant conversation about, says it's on. Okay. One thing that we had significant conversation about, but did not generate a goal around, was welcoming the LGBT community, and perhaps being a little bit more explicit about how we do that. We did develop 2 goal statements. The first is quite broad. We will develop a structure that empowers each congregational member to identify and welcome guests into our community of faith. We will work intentionally to shift our theology and mindset, becoming a culture in which we recognize guests sitting around us, welcome them, and follow through with building relationships, so that we may be a congregation that exists beyond these walls. Our second one was more specific. We will tweak our current structure of greeters, placing greeters more strategically, training them, and revising our physical space to be more clear and welcoming.
Okay, good job. Any questions for that table? Anybody else from that table want to add anything? The answer would be yes, give me time to finish writing. Okay, so these are a little bit abbreviated, but you kind of get the idea enough to be able to vote on them, right? Okay, great, thank you. Okay.
Well, we had a lot of different ideas going back and forth, as I suppose most of you did. Just a couple I'll pull out. The idea of having a designated welcoming process. That is, somebody used the example of going into a church and the usher recognizing this was a new person and taking to a person who is in charge of that and introducing to the minister and then getting a letter in the next week, really inviting them, things like that. Just pulling out one or two, quite a bit of talk about contact with people who have left, identifying and contacting them. Question, are we trying to attract non-Christians to our church, or are we trying to attract other Mennonites? And if so, then are we especially talking about other Mennonites who stopped going to church, or what? We went, but we did more or less, we did more or less narrow down to a goal that's around the idea of bringing people in has very much to do with establishing relationships, and then of course that has a lot of variations. Relationships here in the church that people sense, relationships with people whom we might get to know through, and then bring them to church, and then follow up an established relationship with them. So, there was a little talk about whether the church appears so feminine that men don't like to come. I'll just put that in, but it is relationships that was the key to our goal, and then different ways of establishing relationships.
Okay, good, thank you.
We do not have 3 goals, but we did talk about recognizing the uniqueness of our building and its difficulties that it presents, but also trying to figure out how to capitalize on what we have and improve. And we would have a goal of engaging more people in the ushering system. And we talked somewhat about welcome centers and moving greeters, especially this long hallway right here. Moving greeters maybe closer to the door so that new people, when they come in, would have some help about where to go, because this is a long, intimidating hall. Suggested also maybe we have people at the welcome centers between church and Sunday school, because we've heard that some people don't know where to go to Sunday school or how to find out. And our second goal would be that we would like to have an LGBT inclusion statement on our website, in the bulletin, in the newsletter, every Sunday. Anything else that I forgot? I know.
Well, we had a lot of discussion. We boiled down to three goal statements, some that overlap a little bit. One is to engage students and families of CCYC and others that use our space by having CMC members relate to them to improve and embrace their faith experience.
I'm sorry, students and what? CCYC. Okay.
Yeah, and encourage the use of name tags for CMC members as a means of hospitality and welcoming. How to figure out how to make that happen and implement. We didn't have an answer for that, but one suggested that we maybe just have they should have little RFIDs, and you have to swipe your way into church, and that way. Also, then you'd have an accurate attendance picture, but we're not going to say that, so yeah. And then we also agreed with others about improving kind of accessibility and signage, and would like to work on the accessibility of the building and the campus in general, not just the building, but the outside, on how people figure out how to get in here, so that we can and maybe have better scripting or direction for our members when we're trying to give directions to people, so where they go, where they got. One person thought maybe even having some color coding or things, just so we can help people define where they need to go.
Okay, great, thank you.
We came up with one goal, and that is by December 2016, we will transform our physical space, looking at pew arrangement and sound technology, to create spaces that promote relationship building and a sense of belonging.
Good job. Thank you.
My name is Richard Plank.
Hi, Richard.
I just want to say welcome, everybody.
Hospitality and welcoming.
Well, we did develop three goal statements. Number one, we talked about improving the welcoming process with our greeters, ushers, and welcome centers. We had some tactical ways of doing that, but we didn't include that in the goal statement. We did.
Ushers and the welcoming center?
Yeah,
Okay.
welcome centers. We did talk about tearing out the coat racks there at the south entrance. If that's okay with everybody, we'll just go ahead and do that. tear out the coat racks at the south entrance so that we can place the greeters there so that they're close to the door. Would that? Yeah, make it less congested. Yeah. If that's okay with everybody, we'll get on.
We'll do it this afternoon.
Goal statement number 2, determine what would be required to better serve the Spanish-speaking community within our worship space. And we'd like to see a task force address that by formed and to start addressing that by September 1. I think in terms of a little more about that, we were thinking that we need to do a little bit more within the worship to provide some things for the Spanish-speaking community in particular. That, for example, doing scripture or more singing in Spanish with Spanish than what we're doing now. That'd be one example of that. The third goal would be to relate to the college student community in a better way with staff resources, their involvement in worship, and perhaps providing a niche, how do you say that word, niche? By identifying a place for them to participate within the congregation. So creating that niche for them.
Thank you, Richard Plank.
Yeah.
Did you have something else? Oh, okay. We missed a table back there, right? Okay. Okay, all right.
We have 2 goals and lots of discussion. The first goal is that by February 24th, 2016, which is this coming Wednesday, every person will introduce themselves at the evening meal to at least one person that they do not know. And by February the 28th, that we will do the same thing on Sunday morning. And the second goal, I put the date on this, that by September 1st, 2016, that the church board and commissions would assess the current programs that we have and to see how they are addressing the needs and desires of young adults and families with children in our congregation.
I'm sorry, can you say again, assessing the programs with an eye for what?
For how they are addressing the needs and desires of young adults and families with children.
Our 3 main points have all been stated already: the training of greeters, the providing, and the working at making the south door a main door especially for guests, not for everybody, but for guests. The one thing that we said is we need the whole congregation to be trained in how to be welcoming, because some of us are shy, but the one thing I want to add, especially since this group said the thing about us introducing ourselves. We talked about how we're so afraid that we will introduce ourselves to somebody who knows us and be offended. And so we need to not be offended by each other. We need to be more forgiving and recognize some of us have low facial recognition. Some people forget names easily. And just be gracious to each other and follow the example of what's his name over there?
We too have some points that other people have mentioned, and we didn't come up with specific goals, but I'm just going to talk about some statements that came out here. We have mixed feelings regarding wearing of name tags. We also see a need for more training for greeters, and we too talked about using the South Fellowship door here moving greeters out more towards that door rather than where they're currently at. We also talked about reviewing the process when people sign the attendance sheets. Like, if they're a greeter, what happens to that? Who follows up with visitors? All right. We talked about expanding involvement in individuals in our services, intergenerational, and using more lay people in the worship services. And then another area that we talked about is how do we continue to welcome people who have one foot out the door? I mean, it seems like we've lost a lot of people. Okay, how do we welcome people who have one foot out the door? We see people start attending sporadically, but what do we do about that? Do we take personal responsibility to call those individuals, or is there a process that we should put in place? Did I miss anything?
Thank you.
We have two goals. One is recognizes a current audience of, we'll call them students and Hispanics. And the goal is to consider a second worship service, how a worship service that is at an accessible time and that uses heart-centered experiential forms of worship. Why? To welcome more people into the congregation. The second goal is addresses a new audience, what we're considering a new audience for College Mennonite, that is often talked about as nuns and duns. We recognize that a lot of nuns and duns are not connecting with programs and institutions. So it seems like there's just no way for us to welcome them into the congregation. But we came up with a goal that we think might help. All of us learn about, understand, affirm, and build relationships with the variety of people who participate in a variety of ways in God's big tent. What we affirmed was that our congregation, what we all love about our congregation is that it's a really big tent and it has no corners. You can't hide in the corners because it's round. But what we also recognize is that, and we have a variety of ways of people participating in the tent that we want to affirm. Examples are New Perspectives, Borderlands, the coffee hour. Some people come and all they do is drink coffee and they're under the tent. And that may be a clue as to ways that we can connect with and welcome nuns and duns. There's also, we recognize house churches that are forming as a way of kind of attracting and involving people who don't connect with institutions or programs. And while we can't turn our church into a house church, we can potentially connect with those house churches and find ways to support them.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. All right, one more table.
Seeing all of us as ministers, we encourage that everyone should take responsibility for being a welcoming person. We should find ways to comfortably identify visitors without embarrassing ourselves. That's been said. One idea here was to have sticky name tags for each worship service, a one-time use that everyone would wear, visitors and others so that we're all on the same level in terms of the style of name tags that would be worn. Welcoming Sunday mornings as well as Wednesday evenings was also mentioned here, and the question of following up with visitors, who's in touch with them, wanting to know how that's being done now. Number 2 is involving more people in worship services. We like God at work segments that help us know other things that are going on that we're not involved with. So involving more people, including youth, we want to make that one that we don't miss. Reading scripture, ushering, and other ways. And the youth worship services once a year is a nice way to include youth. And number 3 then, being inclusive in our welcoming. These have been mentioned already. Being inclusive specifically with LGBTQ folks in our internal and external communications, and continuing being welcoming of Hispanic, deaf, and people of a variety of social and economic classes. And affirming, this was said, but in other words, we said it, affirming the borderlands and new perspective groups as part of our congregation rather than being critical of them. They are one expression of our congregation.
Great, thank you. Okay, good job. Give yourselves a hand. That's a lot of good stuff. So we may do some work in kind of combining these before you vote, but for right now, they're up there. You can kind of take a look at them. We're going to take a maybe 10-minute break instead of 15-minute break, so we kind of get back on track. So let's go ahead and regather at 10:50, please. Thank you, whoever did that. Okay, we're ready to do the second table exercise. Let me just remind you that this is for spiritual formation and discipleship. So as CMCers of all ages seek to follow Jesus, we will deepen our faith, strengthen our theological understanding, especially of our own Anabaptist traditions, and grow through spiritual practices. You've had a chance to do this once, so hopefully you'll be able to do this in 45 minutes this time. That's where we're going to have a hard stop so that we stay on time. So please make sure your timekeeper kind of gets you at least by 30 minutes into the process working on a definitive goal statement. And to the extent possible, please try and do what a couple of the groups did last time and put, kind of a concrete statement around it so that we begin to have some actual goal statements. So, 45 minutes, go. Okay. We're gonna, this time I've actually pre-posted the pages at the back of the room, so I'm gonna write as you go. And if, we're gonna consolidate some of these before voting. And so when your table reporter reports your goal, let me know before I start writing if it's really, really similar to one that's already been mentioned, and I'm gonna kind of put them together. That way you all don't need to make tough choices on, well, do I put my sticker here or there? So we're going to try and kind of do a little bit of bunching as we go. So since we started on that side last time, should we start on this side? Great.
What? Support participation across generations in new and current forms of small groups, such as choir, neighborhoods, Sunday school, K groups. What we recognize is we went around the table and told stories about how we have grown spiritually in the last year. And we recognize that a lot of our spiritual growth came from these various forms of small groups. So taking that as a clue, that's how we got to this goal. So what? Again, support participation across generations in new and current forms of small groups. And how? A couple ideas. One is include small group, connecting people with small groups in new member orientation. Maybe it's already happening. We didn't know that. and also creating an inventory or a menu of small groups. We recognize that none of us know all the small group experiences that are happening in our congregation. So it's possible that if we created a menu, we could do a better job at connecting new people to groups that they might be interested in. We also recognize that small groups are organic in many ways, and that there's no way to sort of programmatically create that organism. Anyway, so we recognize the challenges. Our second goal is, and we were focused primarily on strengthening theological understandings, especially of our own Anabaptist traditions. The goal is to encourage the reading of Anabaptist periodicals. How? One idea we have is to subsidize subscriptions. We do that, I think, for the Mennonite. We could do that for other Anabaptist periodicals. Why? To strengthen our understanding of Anabaptist traditions. Also recognizing that other people in the world have spiritual ways of spiritual formation that may inform our own.
Excellent, thank you.
We have 3 goals. The first is, by December 2016, we will strengthen spiritual growth and accountability by means of spiritual companionships, spiritual support groups, and intentional caregiving relationships.
I'm sorry, companionship, care groups, and what was the other one?
So it's spiritual companionships, spiritual support groups, and caregiving relationships.
Thank you.
And are you ready for the second goal?
Almost. Okay.
Okay. By September 2016, we will provide safe spaces for sharing of God stories by granting permission to use heart language to share and see the work of God among us.
Okay, great.
And the third goal is, by December 2016, we will create various forms of ongoing Bible study opportunities.
Terrific, thank you.
Our group has to apologize because we kept drifting to the next conversation. And I think it was because we recognized that part of what's jamming us up in terms of our own faith development is the fact that we feel like we're so busy and exhausted. And so our conversation gravitated towards our third goal at the end, and that is to work at shaping the culture of CMC to emphasize restful, stress-free nurturing for faith formation rather than busy programs that demand lots of volunteers. So our goal is but within a year, for everybody to be looking relaxed and stress-free, but also that as we develop these programs, we keep our eye on not having to have a lot of people do a lot of work to have them, and for people to be able to just come and relax and not, can I share one particular example? Like for me, our meals are very important for my faith development, but in the way we do things, we require people sometimes to too many hours of commitment in the church because you have to go through programs and so cutting back, finding ways of cutting back and just making space to, as our young people would say, to chill.
Thank you.
At our table, we had 3 goals. And the first one we had was, we said, was more intentional Bible study that would be enlightening, and broadening, and opening was one we had. Another goal we had was to do things that we can do things that we could do to implant biblical concepts in our head, like through like the use of music and like the 2 o'clock bell. I don't know how many of you heard that 2 o'clock bell this week and thought about it, but that was like another idea where it's just something that you sort of carry with you. And some of those kinds of things. And a third goal we had was to have, throughout the year, through different times of the year, we would have like special services. Like we have the Easter Lent, and then we have the Christmas Eve service. But other times of the year, we might have things like the one we had this year was like the impromptu Christmas program, which was, I thought was wonderful. But have some of those different things. Now, we had an idea at our table that was interesting in terms of Anabaptist. And that was said, what would happen is if we came one Sunday and we had all the women sit on one side and all the men sit on the other side, and we did some of the historical perspectives of the Anabaptists and did some things like that. But if we just planned a few different, they're just sort of fracking it a little bit and looking at it in a little different perspective, they might be helpful. So.
Thank you.
One of our goals has already been mentioned, and that has to do with small groups. We phrased ours a little differently, but it's essentially the same thing. The second goal was, we didn't put a date on this. I think it'd be something that would be unfolding over a couple of years. Gwen is here panicked about everything that's being projected for 2016. I share her panic. But for this goal, to offer several short courses taught by teachers from Goshen College, Bethany High School, AMBS, others in the area that would be related to biblical studies, Anabaptist theology, and Christian spiritual practices. And I will say that that was not my idea.
Did you have anything else?
Richard Plank. We had a lot of discussion around many things here, but I think what it would boil down to is a couple of goals that we have, and one has already been stated about small group, but we would like to figure out a way to revitalize the small group infrastructure, in particular encouraging a cross-section of people that would include so that in a small group you have people who have been with the congregation for a while but would be available to invite new people. And we thought that maybe small groups, maybe in the program of doing things, the small groups need to be remixed every year. But then we need to balance that with the needs of some small groups who have been together indefinitely. So that needs to be figured out. Another goal that we that we talked about quite a bit was how to provide a more supportive environment for family life, for family in particular, that is more focused and intentioned. I think our concern is about the decline of family and family relationships in the society at large, and concerned about that that we see some effect with the youth, the we wonder what the effect of that is on our youth. And so we would like to see more emphasis on that, on family life and relationships, particularly from the pulpit, and how we do that in spiritual discipleship, training, etc., within our Genesis and MYF age Sunday school classes.
Thank you.
Our goal statement number 1 is to help each other pass on the faith to the next generation. In other words, not leave this just to our youth ministers, but to all be actively involved in some ways to, and to figure out how to help each other. That was one of the emphasis here on passing on the faith. Recommitting to a high bar discipleship, and I think this was said in another way, following Jesus. High bar discipleship would mean following Jesus, following the Sermon on the Mount, etc. We are doing that, but continue to emphasize that. And the third goal has to do with spiritual practices, how to grow through spiritual practices is part of our statement we're working from. And we recognize that the service trip and youth convention for our youth are spiritual, or become spiritual practices, in part because of the way Daniel and other leaders have framed that to be, where do you see God each day, and that sort of thing. So we want to see that continue. We have the spiritual practices among us, and we have this emphasis on prayer right now, but I'm not sure how many are attending the wonderful resources that are available. And I propose something personally that some of the people at the table consent to, and others are not quite sure, but a goal could be that that all people in the congregation be able to name a spiritual practice that nurtures them. And for some, it's much more intuitive, listening for God, watching for signs of God in nature, and many other ways, but that people be able to identify what spiritual practice nurtures them.
Thank you.
We had quite a bit of discussion about small groups as well. And I think echo the idea of not necessarily starting new programs, but instead creating spaces for spiritual formation to happen. One goal was we will put energy into facilitating the initiation of small groups with the explicit purpose of spiritual formation and practicing discipleship. This process will be ongoing and held by staff and/or a recognized group. Our second goal statement, we will expand and continue the spiritual practices introduced during Lent, encouraging individuals and families to daily grow in their connection with God. And was echoed that idea of things that are experiential and that engage us on many different levels as something that we can be part of throughout the week, not just once or twice a week.
Thank you.
We also talked about small groups, but by October of 2016, sorry, Gwen, we would begin an annual practice of having an intergenerational Sunday school classes. And we would all study the same book. And it would be a class that would have Anabaptist / creation care / something else emphasis. And we would suggest a book for October I'm simplifying it, Gwen. Rebuilding the Way by Todd Windward. Rewilding the Way by Todd Windward. And we would also like to see by January of 2017 that we would have short-term small groups, also intergenerational, focused around common interests, peace, Mennonite newspapers, reading the newspapers in general, something. Or we could even have one on Christianity / Anabaptism 101. And those would be short-term intergenerational small groups. No, small groups. Sunday school is our number one goal. And perhaps for our goal number 3, it's time to sponsor a Muslim family. Refugee family.
Thank you.
Our discussion overlapped quite a bit in that it had to do with intensifying our personal relationship with Jesus through more disciplined prayer and other ways. That was one point, but that was a strong one. Yeah, another point that I would lift out is having more different groups participating in the worship service, and we're talking about deaf people. We're talking about the youth having more participation. We're talking about the Goldenrod group. Give them time to help read scriptures, help to lead a prayer, one thing or another. So those are the two main emphases. Along the way, we had some discussion of whether participation by the media is participation in church. And that raises a lot of questions, but somebody made the statement, spiritual formation happens with other people of faith, quote unquote. And that statement did kind of catch on among us. The two that we finally then boiled down to our formal goal statements are experiment with different forms of prayer and scripture reading at times, examples, times of quiet in prayer so that members in the congregation can fill in the blank what they want to pray about, and have the special ministry peoples like Goldenrod and so on involved in our Sunday morning services. That was one goal statement. The other one was sermons that call us to a personal relationship with God. Sermons that call us to a personal relationship with God. More of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, our group struggled to come up with specific goals. We had lots of discussion. I think touched on many of the things that were said, but in terms of a goal, we're rather nebulous, and it was just intentionally increase interaction among diverse groups of CMC to help work on spiritual formation and growth, and just had a lot of good discussion, but not any other specific goals that we were able to articulate.
So I'm sorry, it was increased interaction between groups or?
Among diverse groups.
Okay. Thank you. Wow. Is that it? Okay, good job. Wow. That's a lot of fantastic ideas. So we are scheduled to take a break for a meal. But it looks like we're not quite ready for that. Are we? Sue's gonna check. Okay. Any questions or comments just based on this debriefing? How are you feeling partway through the day? You're through 2 of the 3. How are you feeling? Yeah? Process is working, getting lots of good discussion. Make sure your scribe's getting all of this good conversation down. We'll be really relying on the notes to fill out some of this. So, okay, looks like we're getting close and some people may need to kind of take a little personal break too. It's a beautiful day. Go outside, but make sure you come back. And we will regather at 12:30, so you have some time to enjoy your meal and your table fellowship. Thanks.
Well, I'm guessing that most of us know Great God the Giver as a grace for our food. Let's sing it together. Great God,
Thank you. It is such a gift to my spirit every time I hear you folks sing. So, okay, thanks. We are in the home stretch. We are running roughly on time. We're just a couple minutes behind schedule, but we will make it up. We are moving into our third exercise. The strategic priority is community and unity. And we describe it as we will grow in our practice of love, caring, and unity, respecting diversity within our congregation and our community. Now, we have some things around the room already that kind of sit with that. So you don't necessarily need to kind of resubmit the kind of ideas. I think what we want to talk about is new ideas. And so brainstorming a little bit on the ideas in each quadrant and then selecting, 1 or 2 to actually put in the form of goal statements. So off we go again, and we'll regather. Since you're getting really good at this, we'll stay on track to report at 1:15, which means you have 40 minutes this time. So, okay? All right, thanks. There's been a very good question about the word community in this statement, and we mean that in the sort of broadest sense of the greater Goshen community. You may choose at your table to say there are subsets of that community, so within our congregation and also within the Goshen College community or other types of communities. But by community, we mean that in the broadest sense of the community and unity in this greater Goshen community. Okay? Carol. Okay, thanks. Okay, we ready? Yeah? Home stretch. Gonna get you out to that beautiful day. So here's what is gonna happen for the remaining time. We're gonna do the table reports. I'll make kind of some brief comments about just kind of in summary and in closing. We'll sing the closing hymn, and then we will actually give you little dots to vote so that will be the last thing you do. So if you know exactly what your top priorities are, you can go slap those things on and go on your merry way. So we learned a little lesson last time that it's better to kind of have that as the last exercise so people can leave or linger as long as they need to. So let's do table reports for community and unity. Should we start in the middle just to mix things up?
You remembered my name. Thank you. Richard Plank here. Wow, we had a lot of good discussion here at our table. We tried to boil down a couple of goals for the afternoon. And so our first goal statement, we'd like to work with an annual theme of an identified issue affecting the broader Goshen community, and we'd like to do that within the context of intergenerational groups within the congregation.
Sorry. We're marker challenged today.
Goal statement number 2, we'd like to develop a better level of, we'd like to see the congregation develop a better level of caring and love within itself, be able to recognize and appreciate diverse opinion with others in our own congregation, encourage people to pray for each other, and try to see the world from another's perspective.
We have 2 goals. One is in the fall of...
I'm going to do a marker switch out here. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. In the fall of 2016, to utilize the Wednesday evening meal gatherings to build intergenerational and multicultural relationships at CMC. And starting in the summer of 2016, to plan opportunities for people of all ages at CMC to share their life stories and visions and how those bear witness to God's work in their lives.
Okay, can you do that one again? Sorry.
I'll try. I don't know if I can get through my notes the second time. Starting in the summer of 2016, to plan opportunities for people of all ages at CMC to share their life stories and visions that bear witness to God's work in their lives.
Thank you.
Now for something completely different. Okay, we want to, in this fall, immediately to begin looking at the things that actually lead to disunity and identify them. We thought of a few things that lead to disunity that we need to improve, improving communication and clarity about roles and responsibilities among ourselves and commissions and in church leadership. That was 1. 2, to review the load carried by the Community Life Commission with an eye toward dividing those responsibilities by December 2016. I think we're asking them to do so much that they're not able to do the job that they've been assigned.
And I'm sorry, what was the name of
The Community Life Commission. CLC. Okay, and then the last one is related to the first, and that is we gather a lot of information and data, and we need to examine how it's disseminated and used to identify the work we're doing. So making that information more accessible in order to improve communication.
We had 3 goals. The first one is enriching and empowering the spiritual gifts of our members so that we can continue to do the things in the community that we are already doing. The second one is clarifying financial support for the broader community agencies. And the third one is
sorry. Encourage financial support from whom?
clarifying financial support
Clarifying financial support.
for the broader community agencies.
Okay, and I want to make sure I got this other one. Enrich and empower spiritual gifts.
Of the membership,
Okay. All right.
so that we can continue to do things in the community that we're already doing.
Okay.
Yes. Evaluate and prioritize the community ministries that we have. And one other one that is unwritten that we talked about is not feeling guilty about not being able to do everything that we want.
Thank you.
Okay, we have some goals here. Some. Try to keep them succinct. By September 2016, we will demonstrate a commitment to unity by intentionally creating spaces in Sunday school classes, small groups, and special events to listen and understand those who hold a different perspective.
Thank you.
Okay, and then at the same time, by September 2016, we will, on a regular basis, name and celebrate our areas of common agreement.
No summer vacation for anybody.
A third goal is by January 2017, we will offer Spanish and sign language classes on a regular basis so that we may better communicate with those communities. And our final goal here is by April 2017, we will each know the name and some interests of at least 5 people in our congregation who are 18 years of age or younger.
Stuff. Thank you.
I hate to follow up that. Our table, so the middle one of the poster right there, that's a pretty good way of expressing a goal that we had that we didn't express that well. So you could put a check mark for us. And then another goal we had is to identify ways and encourage all of us to increase our indiscriminate inviting of people whom we meet whom in the community, that we meet in the community, into our congregation. And by indiscriminate, we mean that we stop trying to find people who are going to fit our congregation, that we leave that up to God, and we just do it. The how is to survey congregational hesitations and barriers to inviting. And why? Because inviting is a form of and a foundation to love. We only had one.
Okay, that's a good one. Thank you.
Our group has 3 goals. 1, to recommit to giving and receiving counsel in the gathered community, going back to our baptismal vows.
I'm sorry, recommit
to giving and receiving counsel in the gathered community. Here, thinking of our congregation, not the broader community.
Counsel or console?
Counsel? consul. That's one of our trademarks, giving and receiving consul, in the gathered community. It's okay. No, not cons. Okay. COUNSEL.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Secondly, we're suggesting a study on unity so we better understand what we're talking about when we are doing this work. And we have three things that we identify with that. You don't have to necessarily write these down, but loving and caring relationships lead to unity. The agreeing and disagreeing in love document that I think we're familiar with is part, we could become more familiar with that. And listening to each other with respect is part of unity, and we want to learn more about that or study that and better understand that. And then our third goal is strengthening relationships on all levels, from the one-with-one relationships to congregational meetings and everything in between that. And strengthening relationships with among diverse groups of people, including the LGBTQ folks within us and around us, immigrants, Muslims. We think these are important relationships to be working on. It's already mentioned Spanish, learning Spanish and sign language, but another one connected with that is helping to teach our Spanish-speaking people English. They want to learn English, and relationships can be built by doing that. We have an example in our group of relationships built because of English speakers teaching English to Spanish speakers. And so in summary, it's sort of like relationships trump orthodoxy, but I wanted to use a word other than trump, and so we came up with relationships should unite us rather than letting orthodoxy divide us.
Thank you, very good.
All right, I have a helper. Or I don't. Okay. Sorry, I have multiple issues going on here. Okay, I think we're good. Goal number 1, we will supplement the good care that already happens in Sunday school classes and other groups with spaces for fostering relationships between the generations, creating an environment of mutual care. A couple of things we wanted to emphasize within that. One is that there's some really good care that already happens, and we don't want to diminish that or to say that we're no longer going to worry about that care, but to supplement that by also creating more care that happens between the generations, and that is mutual care, not just the older generation cares for the younger generation or vice versa, but that we care for each other. Second, throughout the year, we will commit to experiences similar to this year's Ash Wednesday service that engage people of all ages, developmental abilities, and ways of encountering God. We also had some significant conversation, but didn't write a goal, surrounding the idea of reaching out to other churches, thinking more ecumenically, not necessarily starting new things, but attending what other congregations do and inviting other congregations to be a part of what we do. So just a little bit more connectedness between College Mennonite Church and other faith communities.
we had, again, good discussion, but trouble getting it narrowed down to goals. In the discussion, for instance, we had the question, can we be all things to all people? And we had suggestions such as starting a tutoring program for public school students who are having academic problems. We're not talking here about tutoring for Spanish, English as a second language, but we're not against that. Perhaps that kind of a program would draw some young people into our church. A suggestion, in a period of a month, identify one or two persons, this is for individuals to do, identify one or two persons you want to know better and do it. We thought quite a bit of, we tend to keep coming back to our hospitality discussion. We also made points that overlap with what's already been said by other groups. We did agree on one goal. We have chosen to be an open, that is, College Mennonite Church have chosen to be an open and accepting congregation, and will continue in that path. And after some discussion, we added, within the context of remaining a peace church. I'll read it again. College Mennonite Church has chosen to be an open and accepting congregation and will continue in that path within the context of remaining a peace church. And I have a personal goal. Never consent to be the scribe if you have hearing, if your hearing is impaired.
Thank you.
Our very first goal was similar to the one that Richard said at the very beginning, but we highlighted the word love. Our membership covenant right now never mentions loving each other. Did you know that? We think that should change. Second goal.
I'm sorry, what was it? Putting love in what?
In the membership covenant.
But membership covenant. Okay.
But second goal is to minister to faith seekers on the margin by building on the new perspective structure that we already have. Perhaps offering, well, there could be some brainstorming about that, but perhaps offering some small group discussion that would be a follow-up to new perspectives presentations, for instance.
Okay, I'm sorry, I need you to repeat that one again, too. I'm sorry.
Just minister to faith seekers on the margin by building on the new perspectives group. Third goal, create more opportunities to have intergenerational fun together as a congregation.
I'm Max Mertz, no relation to Fred Mertz. Our first goal ties in with I believe the one in the middle, it's in the red way on the other side, about strengthening Sunday school. We also would say small group resourcing with facilitation and communication, periodic meetings of leaders of groups. So that ties pretty well into that with a little added stuff. Next goal really kind of goes back a little bit into some with formation and discipleship, but is review existing neighborhood group ministries, and if it continues, strengthen with resource and training, as there's some groups that are functioning, some that aren't, and a variety of things in between.
Thanks. Where'd our microphone person? person go? Oh, there you are. Did we start in the middle? Oh, but we went there and then we went there. We're done? Awesome. Okay. You guys are right on track here. Okay, so, all right, a couple words here about this that probably feels a little overwhelming to you. It feels a little overwhelming to me. I know it feels a little overwhelming to the facilitation team. What is going to happen after today is that a lot of these are fairly tactical. And so we're going to kind of group them all, bunch them all, and then try to align the ones that are a little bit more goal statement oriented, and then kind of try to do some refinement, and then we'll, there will be some to and fro back to the congregation. A couple of you also mentioned that the staff, sort of needs some opportunity to weigh in on a lot of these as well, in terms of sequencing and timing and what's going on today and what is realistic to go on by September of 2016. So that's the first thing, is that's kind of the process that will follow up from here. I had another thought that I lost. So this is fantastic work. I think that there is a fair amount of overlap when you really get to kind of the goal statements, and so I hope no one leaves this room sort of feeling just completely overwhelmed. But there are just some absolutely fantastic ideas here, and you've done a lot of work. You've done a lot of hard work, but you haven't done the hardest work yet, because now what's going to happen is, after we kind of close out, you are going to get a strip of labels. Have you gotten them already? Oh, she's on it. Okay. So these are garage sale labels that we are using for a different purpose today. You have 5 in different denominations, and so we're going to ask you to pick 5 things from all of these ideas. I think there are probably around 60 ideas or so here, just at first glance. So this is an important exercise. I'm going to go through very fast and remind you what they are. So you might want to have a pencil ready so that you can kind of be thinking about, oh yeah, I'm going to want to go to that one, and maybe even draw yourself a diagram on where it is in the room. Yes, yep, no, that's what I was just going to say, yep. So as you think about them, try to kind of, as you go, sort of, writing, okay, I like that one, but then if you get to number 6, maybe say, well, I like this one better, and cross one off. The hard work is not just coming up with 5, it's ranking them. You have a $2, which basically means this is the one you think is most important to the life and mission of this congregation in the next 3 to 5 years. That was my other point. Glad I thought of it. The other thing to keep in mind here is we are talking about a 3 to 5 year plan. So that's another way of sort of thinking about, does this feel really overwhelming? Well, yeah, if we're going to try and get it all done this year, but we're building a 3 to 5 year plan. So keep that in mind. So $2 is the most important thing you believe we need to do. $1 is the second most. 75, 50, 25, you get the picture. Okay, so we're not only going to ask you to limit it to 5, but we're going to ask you to rank those 5. Okay? Any questions about what you're going to do with the dots? Y'all got it? Okay. So now I'm going to go through very, very fast and read them off to you again. Okay? All right. And I should note here that I consolidated the first batch because there was quite a bit of overlap. It was before I sort of encouraged you to not do overlap. So I want, yes? That's absolutely a great idea. So, and we found a marker that works, so. Okay, the first one here was hospitality and welcoming. So these are the hospitality and welcoming initiatives. And again, you're gonna sort of say, well, I kind of like that one and I kind of like that one, and they're sort of similar. Just pick one. We'll work on the kind of consolidation and alignment after today. Involve more people in groups, including lay people in worship. So more God at work moments, more youth involvement. Be inclusive in our welcoming to include an LGBT inclusion statement in the bulletin website, newsletter, and above the gun. Number 2. Number 3, determine how to better serve the Hispanic community, specifically with a task force. So the action item here is to put a task force together to figure out how to do this better. And there may be some nice options here with your sort of pastors in residence here this year. So I would just sort of make a note of that. 4, recognizing the uniqueness of the building. By December 2016 or sometime, transform the physical space in ways that promote relationships and a sense of belonging. Included here is accessibility, signage, the south door for guests, directional kinds of things. This is physical space, okay? Number 4. 5, assess programs for how they're meeting the needs of young adults and families. 6, consider a second worship for students and Hispanics to welcome more people into our congregation. Not dissimilar, but more specific from number 7, find some sort of a niche program to better relate to and to engage students and the Campus Center for Young Children. Number 8, develop a process to welcome back people who have one foot out the door, would include identifying and contacting people who have left or are in the process of leaving. Number 9, take personal responsibility to welcome people. It includes that very specific goal of introducing yourself to one person at Wednesday's meal and next Sunday's worship, which will all be done before all this is even compiled. So you've got to do those things. You got to keep doing them. Number 10, tweak, and I put a bunch of stuff in this one. Tweak the structure and improve the processes for identifying and welcoming guests. This is different than the physical space. This is the actual stuff we do as human beings. So it's things like adding and relocating greeters, how we deal with the welcome centers, what's available there, usher protocols, use of name tags, those kinds of things. However, I did keep separate number 11, training the congregation in how to welcome others. That may get rolled up in the final analysis, but I wanted to keep it separate for voting. And number 12, tweaking the visitor follow-up process. So looking at ways to sort of do a little bit better in terms of not just welcoming them and identifying them when they're here, but how do we follow up with them? Number 12. Number 13, learn about, understand, build relationships, follow up with those relationships to enlarge the big tent. Includes recognizing borderlands and new perspectives as part of our congregation, people who just show up for coffee or lunch, house churches, all of those things, big tent, okay? So those are your hospitality and welcoming. You've got 13 choices, and hopefully you found maybe 1 or 2 that you might want to stick a sticker on. Okay, questions about any of those? Anything you feel's missing? Okay, so I'm going to do now the third one, which was the community and unity. Number 14, work with an annual theme that affects the broader Goshen community and build some intergenerational activities around it. 15, develop a better level of caring and love, appreciate diverse opinions, help people see each other's perspectives, encourage each other to pray. 16, utilize fall meals to build intergenerational relationships. 17, begin offering opportunities for all ages to share stories and visions of how God's been at work in their lives. 18, identify the things that weaken unity or create disunity, build some role clarity, communication, improve communications, but just identify those things so that we can start to address them. 19, divide up the community life commission responsibilities. 20, make data more accessible and use it to improve communication. 21, enrich and empower the spiritual gifts of the membership so we can continue the important work in the community. 22, I don't see anybody writing any numbers down. You guys write numbers? Okay. 22, clarify the financial support for the broader community agencies. 23, evaluate and prioritize existing community ministries so that we don't feel guilty that we can't do everything. 24, demonstrate commitment to unity by creating spaces, events, classes, programs to understand those with different perspectives. 25, regularly name and celebrate areas of agreement. 26, offer Spanish and American Sign Language classes on a regular basis. 27, Know the name and interests of at least 5 members under the age of 18. 28, identify ways and encourage everyone to increase their indiscriminate inviting of people that you meet. Leave the fit up to God. 29, recommit to giving and receiving counsel within the gathered community. 30, do a study on unity. What do we mean and how can we use relationships to unite us versus orthodoxy to divide us? 31, strengthen relationships on all levels with diverse groups. 32, help teach English to Spanish speakers. 33, supplement Sunday school and small groups and other care with spaces for cultivating relationships between the generations. 34, commit to experiences like Ash Wednesday. And I didn't get the second of that, half of that. Does somebody need, you all were there, right? So you know what that means. Okay. All right. I'm going to jump over, get out of sequence, but I want to stay on the community and unity. 59, reach out ecumenically, try to reduce redundant programming and create more connectedness between churches. 60, tutoring, not necessarily language. 61, choosing to be an open and accepting congregation within the context of remaining a peace church. 62, add love to the membership covenant. 63, minister to faith seekers on the margin like New Perspectives. 64, more opportunities to have intergenerational fun. 65, review neighborhood ministries and strengthen with training and resources and support for those that could benefit from it. Questions about any of those? They all make sense? You can see as I'm reading them, some of them are, something that can be done in a minute and a half, adding love to the membership covenant, and some of them are sort of big, what they call big, hairy, audacious goals. And somebody laughed at that. That can be done in a minute and a half. We'll think about it for a while, right? Okay. Finally, spiritual formation and discipleship. Number 35, more sermons that call us to a personal relationship with God. 36, increasing interaction among diverse groups. Similar to something over there, but vote for either one. 37, and this was actually added. Somebody asked me to add this. They didn't report it out. Expanding the mentor and mentee relationships, which I think now are a little bit more of a buddy program, to include a spiritual formation component. 38, more people and groups participate in worship, deaf community goldenrod, similar to something down there, vote either place. 39, find ways for the media audience to engage. Spiritual formation happens in relationship. What are some ways that we can engage the media audience? Number 40, experiment with different forms of prayer and scripture reading. 41, beginning an intergenerational study of a book. The example was Rewilding the Way as a start. 42, short-term intergenerational small groups that might get together to do things like discuss Mennonite news, peace, Anabaptism 101, short-term intergenerational kinds of learning opportunities. 43, sponsor a Muslim refugee family. 44, how to grow through spiritual practices, build a frame around kind of where do you see God each day. 45, all people in the congregation should be able to name a spiritual practice that nurtures them. 46, continue the spiritual practices of Lent. 47, provide more focused, intentional environment for family life, family relationships through preaching and classes. 48, help each other pass on faith to the next generation. 49, recommit to high bar discipleship, intensify personal relationships with Jesus. 50, implant spiritual concepts in our head, for example, the 2 p.m. bell. 51, special services throughout the year, not just Easter, Lent, Christmas. 52, short courses regarding biblical studies, theology, spiritual practices taught by professors and teachers from the local schools. 53, provide safe spaces, and I'm not giving you the dates. Don't worry if you disagree with the date. 53, provide safe spaces for sharing God's stories using heart language. 54, create various forms of Bible study opportunities, more intentional Bible study. Number 55, work at shaping a culture that emphasizes restful, stress-free kind of living, not do a whole lot of 75 new things. 56, this was mentioned by 4 different groups at least, if not more. Support participation across age groups in new ways with new and current small groups, providing menus of opportunities, connecting people through new member orientation, creating spaces for spiritual formation through small groups. Number 57, encourage reading of Anabaptist periodicals. Number 58, strengthen spiritual formation through spiritual companionship, support groups, and caregiving relationships. You got all that? I told you it wasn't going to be easy. But don't worry so much if there are more than one thing that sounded alike to you. Pick the one that kind of just sort of resonated the most, and chances are some of those are going to be combined. So, questions on that last batch? Do you feel like you kind of understand at least what each one is saying? Is there a question? Okay. So just as a reminder, you're going to reflect on your initial thoughts that hopefully you had before coming in here today and the subsequent work that we've done, and then allocating your 5 stickers to 5 goals in priority order using the denominations. And then just put your sticker, make sure it's under, the goal. That's what the lines are for, to give you plenty of space to put your stickers. So we've identified goals for each priority. We've identified lots of goals. The next part of the work will be further planning, discussion with some smaller groups to start to syndicate the key strategic priorities and goals. There will also be a little bit of work done, probably by the leadership team and the commissions, to at least take a first pass at some of the tactical things that will fall under those. But the tactics will go on over time. The strategic planning process we've designed is to really get focused on those strategic priorities and some supporting goals. And then those will serve as a 3 to 5 year framework for aligning tactics over time and beginning to think about what can we add and what do we actually need to lose if we're going to add new programming. So as a reminder, those congregational meetings will be in April to approve this plan. So you'll hear a lot more throughout the month of March as we continue to flesh this out. But at this point, this is the last large group exercise before the congregational meeting to approve the plan. So, everybody good on that? You're all watching your clock saying, are we going to get out of here? You're going to get out of here, because look at this. Sue's going to lead us through the song. Somebody's going to lead us through the song. And then take your time. We'll be here for a while. And just, if you have any questions as you're thinking about these goals, we'll be around here. And I just want to say again, I can't believe that I'm looking out over a room this size of people who've just committed 6 hours on a Saturday. Congratulations, and thank you for the privilege of working with a congregation with this level of commitment.
Thank you for coming, and I think there are people in the kitchen. Make sure you thank them as we depart, if you see them. We also have some snacks on the table there if you need a little more nourishment before you start putting your stickers around. There's a little bit there's some mints and some nuts and some popcorn, I think, or something like that. Yeah, if you're still here at 5, we have leftovers. Thanks a lot for being here, and we will close with Gentle Shepherd, and keep your ears perked up and your eyes going for our next meetings. Yes, make sure the scribe papers are left on the tables. Okay, please.
Can we all stand to sing this together? Gentle Shepherd.